That's okay.
Okay. My name is James Wall. I'm here from the BLC Fields School. Here with Pat doing an interview for the school. Pat, if you could state your name, place of birth to start with.
My name is Pat Miller, and my place of birth is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Actually, very near to here, but I grew up in the suburbs.
Um, and you currently own a business here. Can you explain how long you've been here and own the business?
Well, I moved to the neighborhood in 1986, so I've been here for a long time, and I've had this business since 1997. And it's Heritage West Properties, and I manage a number of the apartment buildings in the area, specifically along Martin Drive and then of Vliet Street.
And it's also said in the past that you renovated the current building that we're in now.
Yes, I purchased this building in 2002, and so for many years it was a Greek grocery store, and then the family moved out and somebody else leased it, and I purchased it from them when the boiler, they had a triple net lease and they had to take care of everything. And the boiler had broken and they didn't want to fix it, and so they sold it to me, and it was pretty much of a crumbling building, and I felt an eyesore and a detriment to the neighborhood. It had a telephone booth on the front of the building, which was before the days that everybody had cell phones, and so for one thing, I felt that was a source of drug dealing and, not the greatest activity. And the prior owner, we had worked with him for a number of years trying to get him to take out the phone booth, but he really wasn't interested in that. And so when the opportunity came up, I jumped on it, even though the two basement walls were caving in and it needed just about everything.
You said I think the basement had dirt floors originally.
It might have had dirt floors originally, and part of the building was built in 1892, and then in 1933 the other part was added on, and they did a pretty good job of that, because I think from the outside a lot of people wouldn't detect it. And I first really noticed it by being in the basement, and the other side of the basement was brick, and this side of the basement was concrete block. But you could also tell from the basement that it had a corner entryway once, and that it was added on to. So the side with the brick, and there was very little room between these two buildings, so what was happening is that the prior owner, the gutters fell off and didn't replace them, so all the water was going between the two buildings, and it was going into that brick, and that's not a good thing.
Definitely not.
So they were a bit compromised when I got here.
And as for the side entrance that you saw in the basement, the past remnants, was this building then kind of, I guess, a corner building of this area? Sometimes you have like bird
Right,
buildings.
so this was built in 1892, and there really wasn't much in this neighborhood at all. But it was a saloon, and the part that we're sitting in now, which is my office, did not exist. But instead, there was a wraparound porch on the front and on the side here on the saloon. And I have a lot of pictures, and it looks like that was replaced several times during its history until Prohibition hit, and the owner, Herman Militzer, decided to build this part of the building, or add on to the building, and create a grocery store.
And it was the photo that you showed us last time in Head. It was a picture of that grocery, I think, or the general store.
Yes, so I have pictures of both the saloon with the wraparound porch and of the grocery store. So he seemed to be a pretty ambitious man, because when I first got the building, I did go down to building inspection or Department of City Development and look up permits, and I found that Herman Militzer was pulling permits all the time for various things. So at one time, he sold Christmas trees on this area here. And so he pulled a number of permits and did a number of things. And then during the years after it was sold, there was not a permit pulled during that period of time.
I did not know they sold Christmas trees on this area. Did a lot of people come in?
I don't know. The only reason I know that is because I saw the permit that he pulled for the ability to be able to sell Christmas trees. So I would suppose it's similar to if I wanted to have a farmer's market here or set up a produce booth, I would have to pull a permit. So I just suppose it was similar to that. And so it was just part of the record that I was able to see, but no one to talk to and ask.
Interesting. And then also a point that you made about there not being a lot of other kind of businesses here, buildings here in the past.
So Valete Street, I think, is kind of funny, and if you look at it, even down to 60th Street where it's doing better, and I think this has worked in two ways, good and bad, but the density of businesses used to be much higher, but there's a lot of public land along Valete Street, like Washington Park, and I think one of the reasons that is, well, first off, Washington Park land was saved when Olmsted came in and decided that was where a park should be located for the city. But the area a little bit to the east of here, where Wick Field is and the police department is, that actually was a larger dump, because back in the day, what people did is they would designate certain amount of blocks, and there would be a lot, and they would create a dump, and everybody just took their garbage to that vacant lot and dumped it. And I've been told that people actually came out, then the men would come out and shoot rats at night that were in there. So anyway, all of a sudden, as the city grew, they decided to make a couple of larger dumps and take things to the dump. So Wick Field actually was one of the larger dumps. And so after they did that for a number of years, then that land is not really suitable to build on, which is why it became Wick Field. And by that time, Washington Park was growing, and they had the zoo. So some of the other recreational things that they had at Washington Park got moved over to Wick Field. So there's baseball fields, kickball fields, very nice tennis courts. Those things were taken off of the location of Washington Park and moved over there.
Are there more activities starting to be put back in Washington Park? Like there's the swimming pool now looks
Yes.
kind of new.
So Washington Park really was even a regional draw park between all of the activities that they had, and they had a number of different activities through the years. At one time, they actually had a horse racing track. I have been told that they had a little airplane landing. They, of course, had the zoo, Washington Park. That's a pretty well-known fact, that the zoo went along Valete Street here and then down 47th Street, or what now is the 41 Expressway. And so the zoo was here for many years. I do remember that it started in 1904 when they sent for an elephant from China, I think. And so the elephant came from China by boat, landed in New York, brought by train, and then they brought it to the park. And that was what started the zoo in 1904. So, but back to your original question. So there was a period of time as the neighborhoods changed and people lost their jobs, the housing stock went down, all of that deterioration also had an effect on the park, and I think the amount of time you have for social activities and people's lives changed to being busier and going around on cars and not enjoying your park. So yes, the park also had a period of decline, but I would say since about the year 2000, a lot of people have been working on bringing the park back because it is a truly beautiful park. And if you do, I don't know if you've ever walked through it, but there are times, even to a person who lives here and has lived here for many years, you can get lost in your own way in that park and just really feel like you're in the middle of just a very rural park-like setting. So also the Urban Ecology Center came in, and that has been a great boon because they have caused a lot of momentum to happen in addition to the ecology type things that they do in the park. They've just generated a lot of interest and things to also happen. There's groups of people who are working on also the Blatz family donated to the city of Milwaukee. It used to be a city park, now it is a county park. But he donated to the city of Milwaukee the band shell that is there, which originally was called the Emil Blatz Temple of Music. And it was the home where the symphony would come out in summer and play. And they used to do Broadway musicals. They used to have, well, the two towers are still there. There were huge towers on either side of the band shell that had really good sound equipment in them. And so you could hear wherever you were, and the tickets were free, but you had to go down to the Milwaukee Journal Company to get a ticket or to get your tickets. And I was told that like 50,000 people would come to hear these concerts at the park, and that there were like 50 people who would help park cars. It was quite the deal. And then that deteriorated, but in the past, probably the past 5 years, they've always given us sort of token concerts in the park. And for the last 2 years now, they have given us 2 months of concerts. So they've doubled the amount of concerts, and the attendance is once again growing, as well as everybody's use of Washington Park.
Do you find yourself going to the park and watching these concerts?
Yeah,
With
I
friends and other...
definitely make a point of it. We just did a newsletter, so we try very hard to let people know what concerts are being performed. This year, I think the second concert in July, one of the people who lives in this neighborhood is performing. So we've definitely let people know about that, and we're going to try and get a neighborhood night together. So there's a lot of neighborhoods around Washington Park that are trying to do that, give people a reason to come. We're using some of the local groups or community groups like Express Yourself Milwaukee. They work with one of the musicians, and the kids who are in their programs and are learning music and dance and ways to express themselves creatively will come out and be part of the concert. So we look to find things like that that might make it of even more interest to come out because you're coming out to support your neighbor.
Talking to me. Do you think, is there a needing for that sense of community again? Kind of as a whole, you said there's different communities trying to kind of get together for concerts and so forth. I guess your thoughts on if there needs to be kind of a more closer knit
Right, and
group.
so I myself, having worked on a number of initiatives, sometimes I go to meetings and I am like, who am I today? Am I Martin Drive neighborhood? Am I the park people? Am I the farmers market? Who am I today? And so it occurred to me also, the Lead Street Business Association, I've been very involved in that. And it occurred to me a couple of years ago that there's a huge sense of community, and everybody has this ownership of their area, and they're not so interested in other areas. And it occurred to me that that was to our detriment. And so I started talking to some of the groups, and I think that is changing. And I also think some of the things that Harley Davidson is doing in the Near West Side Partnership are going to change that. But there needs to be a broader way of how we look at ourselves, because even the very best of the neighborhoods around here don't have all that much on their own. But when you look at it collectively, there's a huge amount of things going on here. And I hope when you leave here that you have a better idea of what is going on here. But if you look at any of the maps that are on various websites like the Metropolitan Association of Commerce, this area is just sort of grayed out like it doesn't even exist. And so a couple of years ago, I had this idea to rebrand it as the West Side instead of any single neighborhood. And I don't think I shared that with you. But we created, I started going to some of the neighborhood associations and some of the bids in the area and explained to them why I felt we needed to brand ourselves as something bigger than any one of us, like Martin Drive, Washington Heights, Washington Park, the Uptown Crossing, and why we needed to do this jointly. And because many people, if you're not familiar with the area, sort of write it off because of things, like I just mentioned, that we don't even we're just grayed out, like we don't even exist on some of the city websites. So that went really well, and we did this booklet, which I'll show you later. And it was called the West Side Guide, and it was based on how I sort of feel about this neighborhood, which to me is the fact that as I look back in history, I see that Washington Park was a focal point of the neighborhood. It was saved and it was preserved for neighborhoods to grow around it, because it was designated that park before there really was many buildings around here. So if you go into the center of it, there is a map, and Washington Park is kind of the central thing in the map. And then there is all the neighborhoods around it, and there is a description of all the neighborhoods, what they feel they are known for historically, or what they feel they are known for now. And then there are all these listings for community-based organizations, community gardens, places to eat, places to look and feel good, or health and wellness places. And it is, I think, a 30-page booklet with a fold-out map. So there are a lot of things going on here.
Yeah. Sounds like the past. What we've found so far is the past was very busy. Had a lot of activities kind of closer together, I guess, such as a theater, the bowling alley, even this kind of small commercial section here, all seem very close knit. I think what you're getting at is, and now it's kind of, and then the past.
It has missing teeth.
Missing teeth.
Well, I think it's coming back, and it took a long time to get where it is, and so it'll take a while to come back. But I think people's perceptions are changing. I think that there is a commitment from a number of the corporations around here to do things that will make this area better. And there's a lot of commitment from neighborhoods and people who live here to tell the story of that it is a good place to live. So at one time it might have been considered the suburbs, but right now it is considered very central. And with the 41 Expressway, I like to tell people that it's 15 minutes from anywhere, because you can always hop on the expressway, and it's 7 minutes downtown. So it has a really, really good location.
And with that, do you see people coming? Do you see people coming from kind of other areas around here mostly in automobiles compared to the trolley system that was here in the past. And do you know? Can you tell me more about the trolley? The logo of Washington Park. I think it's Washington Park has a trolley logo. Was there a main reason for that?
No, the Washington Park, there is a Washington Park neighborhood, and oh, that's a whole nother story. And for a while they had signs up, but I don't think they are up anymore, or else they got taken down on Valide Street because there was a little point of contention. But their logo had the band shell. Martin Drive's logo has the trolley, and that is because right in the center of our neighborhood, and our neighborhood does go from the 41 Expressway to 35th Street, Valide Street to State Street. And so right in the middle of that is Highland Boulevard, or the gateway to the park. And there are these huge buildings that I think are about 460,000 square feet that used to be called Cold Spring Barns. And they housed the trolley cars. So it was the end, the streetcar line went up to 47th Street. And then in the evening, they would be stored there, or if they needed repairs, that was where they took care of it. And so I think that is why the area grew up, because even this side of Highland was considered Wauwatosa at one time. So as things grew up, as there was the park, as there was a streetcar, then these neighborhoods also started to grow, and the city expanded.
With the current kind of revitalization of the area, what kind of other businesses would you like to see again being brought to the area?
There's a huge need for a grocery store, and this is one of the things that the Near West Side Partnership has also realizes, because I have a car and I can get anywhere I want, so I have an abundance of places that I can shop. But to a person who is taking public transportation or a person who is walking, it's difficult to find quality or decent food at an affordable price around here. It is definitely a food desert, as they say. So it's one of the things that I think will happen eventually, is that there will be a quality grocery store. Now, how does that look? Is it a chain, or is it more of a boutique type grocery store where, in order to absorb the risk, maybe you had a coffee shop and you had somebody who was willing to take over the produce, because there's a number of people who do that really well. Cermax is one. Pete's, which is on 13th and Greenfield, I believe. They are very produce oriented. The grocery part, I think, is pretty easy to do. And then a bakery. So that was one of the things that we talked about. Maybe something like that could be larger, but more boutique, where somebody brings their expertise to the bakery and somebody brings their expertise to the produce, and kind of alleviates the risk, and then something like a coffee shop makes it a reason to come there otherwise, over and above a grocery store. So I think it's rethinking, how do you do things, what would work, but definitely that grocery store needs to be quality, it needs to be clean, and it needs to be affordable. And there's some examples of that, of groups that have done that.
Do you think that for those either like small boutiques or bigger stores, do you think the existing commercial buildings, I guess building stock of the area, could be used for that?
I don't think anything that we have here right now on Valide Street is suitable for that. I really do think it would be a new build, and that parking needs to be factored into it. So I don't think currently we have something that would be suitable for that, because there just isn't anything quite large enough. Now, the Layton Market, which is on Layton Avenue by the airport, is pretty small, and they have a lot of things packed in there. and it's done very well, and it's reasonable.
Is it, yes, right, yeah, right across the street from you.
And I think there are places like Whole Foods have come up with a concept. When you think of Whole Foods, if you've been in there anyway, you think of expensive, because I think they're
Yes.
expensive. But they have a downsized model that's made for an urban environment that I think has gone into Detroit and at least one other city. And so that's, another thing. Are there any of the big chains that are doing something creative for an urban market, which is definitely different?
The this is a two-part kind of a question. In the area, there seems to be a lot of different kind of cultural groups. Like, as we're studying them, another group member is studying the modern population, African American kind of population of the area. There's, seems to be 12 more kind of in the area. Do you think they could kind of should it go to like kind of bigger, well-named stores should come in here and open things up, or should it be more of a kind of in the past where people originally came here and started these specific
Well,
kind of foods? If that makes sense.
And maybe I'll jump ahead, and if I haven't answered your question, you can let me know. But yeah, there's been a couple of times when Asian markets have wanted to come into various stores. One of them was, I believe, the Babby and Theater building before the Color Wheel people bought it. And there is a Asian grocery store, I want to say, well, it's between 27th and 35th. And that would be great, but it's still a little risky. I don't know. You need a lot of capital to do something like that. So but then there's other areas that have done it, because around 76th and Mill Road, they have made a shopping mall out of an old building. And so the vendors of all nationalities and ethnic groups have almost like an antique mall where you buy a section, sort of, and their things are just put out on tables. So you come in this giant building. Well, giant is a little exaggerated, but you come in this very large building, and there's all these little vendors within it.
Sounds like kind of like the market downtown. It sounds like. All different types of vendors.
So that would be a great thing. It's finding the person who's willing to do that, and oftentimes they have language barriers or things that don't make it the easiest. It's hard to own a business nowadays. I suppose it always was, but entrepreneurship is hard.
I believe you. But you did it though. It seems like kind of coming into this historical building.
Yeah,
That's what's trying to get.
there are people who can do it, and I think it involves many things. And within this environment, I think it takes the kind of person. This isn't necessarily true, but for the most part, it seems the people that are doing it and it's working. We have the Amaranth Bakery, okay? And I think if you would have seen that area before it was opened, I mean, it's greatly improved, and a lot of vibrancy and creative things are going on there that weren't going on before that happened. So the kind of person who seems to be able to do it is also, at least in the pioneering stages, at some point that changes, but it is the person who has a true connection to the community and brings the community in. So Dave's Place is not only a place to get bread and food, it is a place to meet, and it is a place where people want to meet. And so that person really needs to embrace the whole community, whether you want to or not. I think you have to. The Interlude is the building on 40th and Valete Street, and it was before my time, and I never was there. I only heard of it afterwards. But that seemed to be that kind of place. It was sort of a cooperative, and it might have been a bar and food, and there was music, and all of the neighborhood people wanted to come there. But just opening your doors doesn't create that. It's how do you incorporate the neighborhood, and how do you connect to the community. And Dave himself is a resource to people. So, and I oftentimes go there not just because I want to eat, but because I want to ask Dave, hey, what do you know about this? How can you help me?
He seems like also a very good historian of the area. What drew you, what drew you to this area?
What?
What drew you to this
Um,
location?
A fluke, fate. But actually, my parents grew up around 24th and Valete Street when it was a really thriving neighborhood around St. Michael's Church. But when they got married, their goal was to move to the suburbs and leave some of the already start of urban decay that was happening. So I grew up in the suburbs, and it's not that way now where I grew up, but it was pretty rural, and there weren't a lot of kids around. And I enjoyed when I visited my cousins in the city and all the activities that there were that you could just walk to, as opposed to kind of being isolated. So anyway, I came here because of some of the apartment buildings on Martin Drive and managing them. And I wasn't familiar with the area at all. When I looked it up on a map, I decided that was not a very nice neighborhood. But then I came here, and I really loved it. And the buildings over there are absolutely beautiful. And they were built 1926, 1927, and to this day they are extremely comfortable for people to live in. You don't live in them and feel that it's outdated or that it's not a great place to live. And so it seemed to me kind of important to preserve that, because I think the architect was pretty good.
Does your other family members' perceptions or kind of perceive this area still the same way?
I think it has changed. When I first moved here, I think my mother was appalled. Like, what are you doing? And but it has changed, and so has the area changed.
Do you saw a lot of family coming to this area and visiting you and going to the
Yeah.
park and-
I've dragged my brother and sister-in-law over to Amaranth Cafe, and so they frequently come there from Muskego now. So, in fact, that's a meeting place. When they're going there, it'll be, hey, I'm going to the Amaranth today. You want to meet us?
They do have really good food. Yeah, you. Also, I guess I want to ask you, like, how are you getting the word out about this area? I know you're kind of historian of the area, but do you find it kind of important to get the word out about how this area is changing?
Right. Well, as a business person, and when I first moved here, I found out very quickly, just as I looked up on a map, and I decided this was not a very good neighborhood, or it wasn't a nice place. And I based that just by looking at a map and thinking it was close to 35th Street and it was close to Valete Street. And I didn't even really know much about those streets, but I decided that wasn't good. And then I came here and I'm like, wow, this is really pretty nice. And so what I was doing is I was showing apartments and I was trying to draw people into this area. And so, but far before you can even get them in the door and see how nice it is, you have to get over that perception. And so one of the things that I noticed was that they would say to me, what I would hear from them is that by Valide Street? And is, because most people don't know where Martin Drive is, and that's where I was trying to get them to. So, but then they'd start talking, and I'd get them interested in the apartment, and then they'd be, where is that exactly? And I would tell them, and they'd say, is that by Washington Park, and is that by Valide Street? And I would have to say yes, and then a lot of times it would be, nope, not interested. I don't get that anymore. But it became a serious concern of mine. How do you start changing the perception? How do you start making people think differently about an area? So I did that I did that first by actually starting to go to some block watch meetings, because I thought I better find out if it's less safe than what I feel it is. And this neighborhood has had and always has had a very, very low crime rate on this side of the park, and what I call, or this portion of Martin Drive. There's no alleys. It is this little island that is surrounded by all these major things like Washington Park, the 41 Expressway, the Miller Valley, even on the other side, the Cold Spring Barns. So it's very contained, and the lack of alleys has made it safer, and the connection. So, but by working on a neighborhood group or a neighborhood association or whatever you want to call that, and by working on positive things, we used to be in the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, and the True Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative is based on the concept of promoting the positive things in the neighborhood, not that you overlook the negative things. But when you focus on the negative, when there's something bad going on, somebody's house was burglarized, or something bad just occurred and people want to rally around that, that feeling goes away very quickly, no matter how horrible it was. It could even be a shooting or someone murdered. And that feeling of wanting to rally around that goes away quite quickly. And so there's no reason to stay together as a group, because you start thinking, well, I, in my Pollyanna way, just think that's never going to happen again. That was horrible. It happened once. It's not going to happen again. And I think most people, even though they don't express that or they become more fearful, the worst part is to be more fearful and to withdraw and not go out and do the things that you would do in a healthy neighborhood. So I truly believe in the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative and focusing on the positive things and dealing with the negative things in whatever other way is available to you, working with the police department, but more so promoting what's positive about the area.
That's an excellent goal, kind of for every community that they get, because the code. My experience of living in Milwaukee, Kenosha, so the closer you are to your neighbors, the better off you just are, because you get everyone's opinions and kind of watch out for each other. Which discussing, talking to Phyllis yesterday, she seems like people there's that longing for that sense of community still.
Yeah. And Phyllis is another person who's really a community person or a gatherer of people. So she can talk to and go to anybody, and they, accept her and really like her. I mean, yeah, she's a gatherer, and I'm amazed. I've been working with her over in that area, and I'm amazed at how many people in an area where I think many people think there is a lack of care. There isn't. There's always people who do care, but it is who is the gatherer, who can bring these people together in a way that can produce positive results, and what is that method? And I think that method is, or a good method in areas that are distressed, is to bring them together and show them that they can accomplish something. And so we have a number of little successes that we have made of things because of people coming together in the neighborhood and hearing about some of the problems, and then, you know, discussing a way to address it, addressing it that way, and then seeing a successful result. You start to know that you can accomplish things and that you can change some of the ways things are going in a positive way, and that gives people hope and investment and a sense of satisfaction, and, you know, which makes them want to do more. Because if I can do that, I can do something else.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like a chain of events. Seems like needs to occur. And if Phyllis does a kind of community events in her home on, sounds like in her front yard on the street. She's definitely kind of taken pride in her house, her kind of little area, in which I feel you have done the same thing in this building that you're in currently now. Yes, because as you were discussing in the past, you've kind of fixed this place up. Do you hold any community meetings in this building?
I have, but our community, this is something that is sorely lacking in the area. So our community here, even though this neighborhood is kind of small, 526 households, it's grown far beyond the capacity of my office. And so we meet at the Washington Park Senior Center, and we have to pay rent to meet there. There isn't a community meeting place. And as I mentioned, people in neighborhoods are really territorial. We have some people who are really territorial, and they don't like to cross too many roads or too many boundaries to go somewhere to meet. So we met for at least 20 years in someone's basement, and we grew out of that space, or we kind of grew up and decided that possibly also when you have a group going for a long time and pretty many people go, and now you're all brand new and you just moved to the neighborhood, and you start thinking about, I'm going to go to that house and go in that basement. I mean, am I really welcome? So we decided a number of years ago that we would move over to the Washington Park Senior Center. And we had been on an annual basis in May having one annual meeting there, and we always got a better attendance at the senior center, but it was also a kind of a bigger deal of a meeting. So that's what we are currently doing. And now, of course, we also have the community garden, and this neighborhood likes to do a lot of social activities. Nighttime trick-or-treat is one. We have a picnic. We have these movies under the stars, and so those things are starting to happen at our community garden now that we have that space. And it's just an odd pie-shaped piece of land that had nothing going on at all, and we started the community garden, and we started, getting people to come there. And so I don't know if you've walked by or you've seen it, but we just built this garden pavilion. And so for a period of time, we relocated some of the things that were in this lot. And so we had to replant grass. And so I had some snow fence around it so that it wouldn't get, trampled on. So yesterday that snow fence went down, and it's such a nice place because I go over there. I mean, it's totally on the other side of the neighborhood. And I see someone on their porch and I'm like, Dave, can you mow the lawn now? Which I'm sure I didn't even need to tell him because he has just been doing this on his own, except we have this big event on Friday. So I just wanted to make sure that he could, because if he couldn't, we'd find some way to do it. But that is the sense of pride. And when we first talked about doing this, I think, so it's on one side of the street and on the other side there are houses. And I think some of the people were apprehensive about us doing that because is this going to be cared for? You go around and you see some of the community gardens and they look pretty messy, but ours does not. It is well cared for, and that's tonight at 5 o'clock. This just came up. We're going over there. We're trying to get people to go over there, and we're spreading mulch so that it's finished for the for the event on Friday.
Event?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Should grab all of us.
Really? We'd get that moved fast.
Awesome.
What are you doing at 5?
Nothing. I'll give you a hand. Who takes care of the gardens usually? Just kind of whoever is closest?
So our situation is different from a lot of community gardens because many of them charge, just a nominal fee. But so when we started, we had gotten permission to use the land from the Department of Transportation, but we never got it off the ground. We were just going to plant some perennial plants and make it look nicer because the Department of Transportation wasn't great at mowing it, so it was kind of just tall grass. Anyway, and then that just never really materialized. And then there became a point when our neighborhood got into the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, so there was some funding available to do things. So, and also it's a connection of, this community person or the right person who comes in who can do it. So at that time, there was a young man who moved back here from Madison, went to school in Madison, was generally from the area but the suburbs, went to school in Madison, got his teaching degree, and came here into the city of Milwaukee to teach. So he came to a few meetings, we got to know him, and found out that the biggest thing that he missed in Madison was he had a lot with this big community garden. It was his own garden, not a community garden. But he knew a lot about gardening. He loved to garden. This was an important part of his life. And so we connected him to the lot. And would you help us do this, being that you have the knowledge, really? So he made up a plan. We raised the money. We physically built the beds with residents and had, put dirt into them, and residents and kids. And it has just grown. So each year we've added more beds, and to this year when we're adding this pavilion. But I didn't answer your question really. So how ours has worked is that each year, so also our neighborhood has used the email and internet from the very beginning. And a lot of people in the beginning poo-pooed that, kind of like, well, not everybody has email. But that was still no reason not to connect that way. So we started gathering email addresses, and we have many email addresses for this neighborhood. So we just sent out, so we have a listserv now, it's much more formal. So we send out information that there are garden beds available, and if you want a garden bed, to let Steve know. And so far, every year, and each year we add a few beds, we have had the perfect amount that we needed. So this year we added another 2 beds, and we're probably at our capacity because of space and shade of trees.
Are there any other spaces around?
We only have one vacant lot, and I think somebody is going to buy that vacant lot. So we're lucky. We don't have a lot of vacant lots. But the other thing that's interesting is the Victory Garden Initiative. So, for a very reasonable amount of money, they will come up and set a garden bed up with organic soil. And so, we've taken advantage of that and found ways to even make that less costly for people. So people have the opportunity to learn gardening at our community garden and then maybe install one at their home and making room for someone else to be at the community garden.
In which you have a garden in the front of this.
That's a Victory Garden. So
When you said that started.
the Victory Garden Initiative, I don't know how long they've been around, not real long, but somebody named Gretchen Mead and some of her friends were sitting around probably while they were having soda pop and decided that there was a need to teach people, you know, how to come back to growing their own food. And came up with this idea. So they have massive volunteers, and during about a week and a half, they install over 500 garden beds and fill them with soil. They go out and they build them, they fill them with soil, and they put those signs up over about a week and a half period of time every spring in Milwaukee for maybe 5 to 7 years maximum.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a lot of garden.
that is.
Gardening classes. Huh.
So, and I think we have some of the really, you know, Will Allen is another person who's really well known for his urban gardening. And my family always had a garden, so I understood that. But Will Allen's concept of gardening is so different and so progressive, I think.
Who in your family started, or who, I guess, who got you into gardening? Was it mostly your mom and dad?
Well,
or just
I
kind of-
think back in the day of my parents, everybody gardened a bit. Because you wanted fresh vegetables, and if you had, and my parents grew up and experienced the Depression, so growing vegetables was very helpful. But I think, I don't know for sure. I think back then, I think just everybody sort of did it. If you had a little land, you know, grow something, at least tomatoes and beans and peas and whatever.
And it's becoming popular again.
Mm-hmm.
A lot, especially in cities and
Mm-hmm.
urban settings. It seems like. Oh, would you mind telling me a little bit more about your parents? Where they kind of grew up and.
Well, so I have learned that my parents, actually, my mother grew up around 24th and Galena, and then my father was a little bit to the east of there, and his father was an entrepreneur and had 3 or 4 patents. But anyway, and he had like a tool and die shop or something. They would actually machine make these things. And and then St. Michael's, I want to say St. Mary's, St. Michael's Church was really a focal point in the area. So they both ended up going there and somehow met. I don't think I ever heard the story how they met. They both passed away, so I can't ask them anymore. But so they grew up in that area. But when they got married and bought a house, they moved west.
Then, you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother, and he lives in Muskego and comes to the Amaranth Cafe. And actually, they come all the time to the different events that are on Valide Street, the art walk and stuff. So doing events, I mean, if we can get to the stage on the other side of Valide Street, and the Amaranth is starting to do this. They have their farmers market opening, which will also have vendors. But people will come out for things like art and culture and go to neighborhoods that they wouldn't consider going to otherwise. So you need more of a draw. Debbie Pagel at Eat Cake is a destination business, definitely. Eh, although she does assure me that a lot of people in the area use her when they are getting married. It's more of, she makes event cakes and, but it's definitely a destination business. So if you can create a destination business, that's a good thing.
And does the history of these buildings help that aspect? Or do people come here just because of, like, just do you think people want to come here just because of, like, EK, kind of the more boutique stores, and kind of care less about the architecture?
Yeah, I don't think they
Historical.
necessarily come for the architecture, but I mean, as best as I can figure, and I just have all these self-made ideas. But people, back in the day that these streets and these neighborhoods were built, you didn't have as much transportation. If there would be one car in a family, that would be unique. I mean, you can tell by the lack of garages and lack of, So it was just common. You'd walk to the corner and you'd take the streetcar and you'd go where you needed to do your shopping, So you'd go downtown if there were big things that you wanted to buy or, presents or fancy things. But otherwise, you would get your groceries right here. This was a grocery store. The next store over, one was a bakery and one was a butcher. So I'm sure many people just came here and they didn't, hop in their car and go all over or read the newspaper that has ads from a bazillion different Aldis to Metcalf's to Pick and Save and go, I'm going to go to Metcalf's for this and I'm going to go to Pick and Save for this, unless you don't have a car, and then you have very, very few choices. So I think life is just different. You of course you would support the local.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I got everything that I was thinking of so far. Did you find anything? Yeah. Did I miss? I would still like to do the walk if you don't mind.
Yeah,
If you have time.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And we wore Tucker out.
We did.
He's done.
Isn't it amazing how when you put a leash on him, he's so much better?
I think you have a soothing voice. I think that's the thing.
He just knew
Morning.
he couldn't run off and steal things and get away with it.